Shadows Beneath the Badge, a Swedish Scandal. Chapter 1. Whispers in the Press. In the winter of 2017, as snow blanketed the avenues of Stockholm and citizens prepared for the calm of the approaching holidays, a different kind of chill gripped the corridors of power, a quiet unease, barely perceptible at first, yet unmistakable for those attuned to the subtle shifts of politics and press. Beneath the polished surface of Sweden's famed law and order image, a storm had begun to gather, one not of weather, but of whispers. The first murmurings came from within the Riksdag's marble halls. Parliament staffers, accustomed to discretion, noted unusual behavior among certain security liaisons. Coffee break conversations became guarded. Mid-level bureaucrats in the Ministry of Justice grew restless, questioning sealed files and unexplained meetings. But it wasn't until a source from the Swedish Police Authority reached out to a journalist from Dagens Nyheter, DN, that the seeds of a national scandal began to take root. The tip was simple but chilling: there is a unit operating outside the rules. They're listening to people they shouldn't be. Dagens Nyheter, one of the nation's most reputable dailies, had long maintained a reputation for meticulous investigative journalism. Still, what the reporters stumbled upon over the next few months went beyond what even their most cynical instincts had prepared them for. With tenacity and discretion, they began assembling a team. Soon, other newspapers joined: Svenska Dagbladet, SvD, known for its conservative rigor; Aftonbladet, a popular tabloid unafraid of power; and Expressen, a liberal-leaning daily with strong investigative roots. Bound by a mutual concern for the integrity of Swedish democracy, the four papers launched a joint inquiry under the code name The Secret Files of Stockholm. Their findings, slowly gathered over late-night interviews, leaked memos, and encrypted communications, painted a harrowing picture. A covert intelligence unit within the Swedish Police Authority, originally created post the 9/11 to monitor international threats, had evolved into something far more insidious. What began as national defense had metastasized into domestic surveillance. Journalists discovered that the unit had for years been monitoring private citizens without judicial oversight. Their targets were not solely suspected terrorists or violent extremists. Rather, the net had widened to include political activists, environmental protesters, civil rights lawyers, and, most shockingly, members of the Swedish Parliament. Even fellow police officers who raised concerns were surveilled under vague pretexts. The surveillance was not only unauthorized, it was technologically sophisticated. Dagens Nyheter published redacted internal emails from high-ranking officers within the National Operations Department, NOA, revealing that clandestine software, imported under secrecy and unregistered with Swedish data authorities, had been deployed to tap mobile phones, access encrypted messaging apps, and even hijack webcams. Aftonbladet broke one of the most damning parts of the story. A whistleblower named Mikael, a pseudonym for a former technician within the unit, provided an exclusive interview, his voice disguised, his face blurred. This wasn't about terrorism anymore, he told the reporter. It became political. We were ordered to monitor individuals who had never been accused of a crime. And when we objected, we were told, this comes from the top. Do your job, or someone else will. Svenska Dagbladet, meanwhile, uncovered internal communications between the Swedish Police Authority and Säkerhetspolisen, SAPO, the Swedish Security Service, indicating that SAPO had been informed of the operations and had neither intervened nor reported them. Instead, the document showed an institutional indifference, one that many later would characterize as complicity. The journalists worked under immense pressure. Government spokespeople refused to comment. Several editors reported being approached by anonymous sources warning them to consider the consequences of continued reporting. Yet, the team persisted. They knew that what was unfolding wasn't just a violation of law, it was a threat to the democratic soul of Sweden. On November 18, 2017, the four newspapers simultaneously published the first installment of their investigation, titled "The Secret Files of Stockholm: Inside the Illegal Surveillance of a Nation." The revelations landed like an earthquake. The Swedish public, long proud of its open government and rule of law, was shaken to its core. Protests erupted in front of the Parliament building in central Stockholm. Civil rights organizations held press conferences demanding accountability. Legal scholars debated whether Sweden's constitutional protections had been effectively suspended under the radar. Overnight, the image of Swedish policing, efficient, neutral, bound by law, was cast in doubt. Instead, it was replaced by a grim possibility that even in one of the world's most transparent democracies, power could be abused and truth buried unless someone was willing to dig it up. Stockholm, once the quiet administrative heart of Sweden, had suddenly become the epicenter of a growing political and ethical crisis. And for the first time in decades, the press, those who had dared to whisper aloud, had become the guardians of democracy's last line of defense. Chapter 2: A City in Turmoil. Stockholm, winter 2018. The cold that gripped Stockholm that winter was brutal, but it was nothing compared to the chill that settled over the hearts of its citizens. After the explosive revelations published by the country's top newspapers, Sweden's capital found itself caught in a storm far greater than sleet or snow, a storm of betrayal, outrage, and fear. Protests erupted in Sergels Torg and outside the Parliament building. Students, journalists, civil rights groups, and ordinary citizens gathered, holding signs that read, "Don't watch us, serve us. Surveillance not equal to safety. The law applies to everyone, even the police." Chants echoed through the streets. What had started as whispers of misconduct now roared through every cafe, subway station, and family dinner. Sweden, a nation proud of its transparency and human rights record, was confronting a dark mirror. But behind the public outrage lurked deeper questions, questions that no government official had yet answered. How long had the illegal surveillance gone on? Who had ordered it? And most terrifying of all, how much had they seen? Among the most shocking elements was the sudden disappearance of Layla, the junior data analyst at the police IT department, the same woman whose quiet concerns had started this cascade. Her phone was off. Her apartment was dark. A friend told Dagens Nyheter. She knew something she wasn't supposed to know. And now she's gone. Official police spokespeople claimed she had taken emergency leave for personal reasons. But anonymous sources inside the department told a different story of internal interrogations, wiped emails, and pressure to remain silent. Then came the leaks. Encrypted emails began arriving in the inboxes of key journalists, files with timestamps, names, and access logs. They showed that the illegal monitoring wasn't limited to criminal suspects. It extended to politicians from minority parties, environmental activists, internal affairs officers, even journalists covering sensitive stories. The outrage deepened into dread. Sweden, for all its democratic strength, seemed to have been quietly watching its own people, not for safety, but for control. The government scrambled. Opposition parties demanded an independent inquiry. Some members of parliament threatened to resign if the justice minister didn't act. But the official response remained vague and slow. A press conference was held. The justice minister stood before flashing cameras and said, "We are investigating these reports seriously. If illegal actions were taken, those responsible will face consequences." But the people weren't convinced. The city was no longer just cold. It was uneasy, restless, waiting for answers, fearing what might come next. And still, no one had heard from Layla. Chapter 3: The Reckoning. Spring 2019, Stockholm. As the snow began to melt and the icy streets of Stockholm thawed into spring, the heat under the feet of Sweden's most powerful institutions only intensified. For months, citizens had waited for justice. Now, with public trust crumbling and international attention mounting, the reckoning could no longer be delayed. The headlines were relentless. Dagens Nyheter broke another exclusive: whistleblower resurfaces, secret recordings expose internal pressure tactics. Miraculously, Layla had reappeared, not in Stockholm, but in a remote coastal town in southern Sweden. She had been living in isolation, under an assumed name, fearing for her life. But now, she was ready to speak. Through her lawyer, she released audio recordings, internal documents, and encrypted files showing how high-ranking police officials had ordered warrantless surveillance on hundreds of individuals, bypassed Sweden's Security Oversight Commission, used national securities as a cover for monitoring journalists, dissidents, and even political opponents. One recording was especially damning: a meeting between two senior officers, one of whom said, "We can't afford to let these people keep poking around. Control the story. Control the people." The story exploded. Expressen and Svenska Dagbladet published synchronized exposés. Aftonbladet ran an editorial titled, "This is not the Sweden we were promised." Public trust in the police dropped to historic lows. Mass demonstrations returned to Stockholm. This time, the protest signs read, "We stand with Layla. No one is above the law. Restore our rights or resign." Under immense pressure, a special commission was formed, independent of the police and judiciary, with the power to subpoena, investigate, and prosecute. Within weeks, 3 top officials in the police authority were suspended. 2 government ministers were called in for questioning. Internal Affairs opened cases against a dozen officers, some of whom were caught attempting to erase digital trails. Layla, once a quiet analyst buried deep in the bureaucracy, became a national symbol, not just of resistance, but of integrity. She spoke publicly once, briefly, during a televised statement. "I did what anyone should have done. But I was punished for it. I love this country, that's why I couldn't stay silent." Sweden began the slow, painful process of reform. Oversight laws were rewritten. Transparency regulations were strengthened. Surveillance practices were placed under strict judicial review. But the wounds were deep, and healing would take time. By summer, the city felt different. The air was lighter, but the memory remained. In the heart of Stockholm, a mural appeared, a portrait of Layla, surrounded by lines of binary code turning into birds. Below it, a single sentence in Swedish. Sanningen kostar, men. Truth has a cost, but lies always cost more. What really happened in Sweden, 2017 to 2018? In 2017, Sweden faced a major scandal when the Swedish Transport Agency was found to have mishandled sensitive government data by outsourcing IT services to foreign companies without proper security checks. This exposed classified information, including military, police, and protected identities. The scandal led to the resignation of top government officials, including 2 ministers, and triggered a public and political outcry. Major newspapers like Dagens Nyheter, Aftonbladet, Svenska Dagbladet, and Expressen reported on the issue extensively. There were also concerns about a culture of silence inside Swedish authorities, including police, where whistleblowers feared retaliation. Crossmark what parts are fictional in the story. The story about a secret police unit illegally spying on civilians, a woman named Layla, or the secret files of Stockholm is fictional and dramatized. These parts were added to make the story more emotional and engaging, but they are not based on specific real-life events. White checkmark bottom line. The core theme, illegal behavior by government officials and poor data protection, is true. The detailed story with characters and events is a fictional dramatization based on that real scandal.